The CEO millionaire was alone in his mansion, until little girl with birthmark approached him. The pristine halls of Sterling Industries headquarters buzzed with activity as 31-year-old CEO Thad Sterling III strode through the corridors, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floors. Despite being surrounded by hundreds of employees, he felt utterly alone. The weight of running a multi-billion-dollar technology empire at such a young age pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy winter coat he couldn't shed. Thad's success story was the talk of Silicon Valley, the youngest CEO to take a company public, featured on the cover of Forbes by 28, and now the owner of a sprawling mansion in the prestigious Pacific Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. But tonight, like every night for the past 3 years since his parents' tragic accident, he would return to an empty home filled with nothing but expensive furniture and echoing footsteps. As his private elevator ascended to the penthouse office suite, Thad caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. His angular features and perfectly styled dark hair couldn't hide the exhaustion in his deep-set blue eyes. The last board meeting had dragged on for hours, with shareholders demanding even higher profits and questioning his decision to allocate resources to charitable initiatives. The Sterling name isn't associated with handouts, they'd reminded him as if he needed any reminder of his father's ruthless business philosophy. The elevator doors opened to his modernist sanctuary 60 stories above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the San Francisco Bay, bridges spanning the glittering water like golden threads in the late afternoon sun. Thad loosened his tie and sank into his ergonomic chair, swiveling to face the city he'd helped shape but somehow never felt part of. His assistant, Margaret, had left a stack of contracts requiring his signature, each one representing another business deal, another acquisition, another step toward, what, exactly? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through countless emails and meeting requests, but not a single personal message. No dating app notifications, no texts from friends. Those had dried up years ago when he'd stopped having time for anything but work. The only reminder of family was the small photo frame on his desk, showing a younger version of himself with his parents at their family's lake house in Lake Tahoe. That property, like everything else, now belonged solely to him, though he hadn't visited since the accident. Some places held too many memories. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, but Thad barely noticed. He was lost in spreadsheets and quarterly projections when Margaret's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Sterling? I'm heading home for the day. Will you be working late again?" "Probably," he replied, not bothering to look up from his computer screen. "Thanks, Margaret. Have a good evening." "Sir?" She hesitated, her voice carrying a note of concern. "Your uncle called earlier. He wanted to remind you about the Family Foundation's annual charity gala next weekend. He said your parents always considered it the most important event of the year." Thad's jaw tightened. "Tell him I'll think about it," he responded curtly, though they both knew he wouldn't. He hadn't attended the gala since inheriting the company. The thought of facing all those familiar faces, their pitying looks and inevitable questions about when he'd settle down and carry on the Sterling legacy, it was more than he could bear. As the office grew darker, the city lights began twinkling like earthbound stars. Thad finally powered down his computer and gathered his things, his movements mechanical, practiced. The night security guard nodded respectfully as he passed through the lobby, but Thad barely registered the gesture. His Tesla waited in its reserved spot, the only car left in the executive parking garage. The drive home would take 15 minutes, and then another evening of solitude would begin in his 12,000-square-foot monument to success and loneliness. The gates of Thad's Pacific Heights mansion swung open automatically as his Tesla approached. The sprawling Victorian-style home, with its meticulously maintained gardens and restored historical facade, stood as a testament to old money and new success. But tonight something was different. As his headlights swept across the front of the property, they illuminated a small figure sitting on the bottom step of his grand entrance. Thad's security system should have prevented any unauthorized access to the grounds. His first instinct was to call his security team, but something made him pause. As he pulled closer, he could make out more details. A child, probably around 10 years old, wearing a purple backpack and clutching what appeared to be a worn photograph. Her head was turned slightly to the side, as if she was trying to hide one side of her face. He parked his car and stepped out cautiously. "Hey there," he called out, keeping his distance. "This is private property. Are you lost?" The girl turned to face him fully, and Thad's breath caught in his throat. A port wine birthmark covered the right side of her face, spreading from her temple down to her jaw like a watercolor painting. But it wasn't the birthmark that made him freeze, it was her eyes. Crystal blue, exactly like his own, exactly like his father's. "My name is Wren," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "Wren Blackwood. And I think you're my uncle." Thad felt the world tilt slightly. Blackwood, his mother's maiden name. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud in years. "That's impossible," he said, more sharply than he intended. "I don't have any siblings. There's been a mistake." Wren stood up, brushing off her jeans with one hand while still clutching the photograph. "My mom's name was Cassidy Blackwood. She was your mom's sister, the one nobody talked about." She held out the photograph, her hand trembling slightly. "This is the only picture I have of them together." Against his better judgment, Thad stepped forward and took the photograph. The paper was creased and worn, but the image was clear enough: two young women at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. One was unmistakably his mother, Caroline, in her early 20s. The other? He had a vague memory of heated arguments behind closed doors, of a name that was never spoken, of family photos with a conspicuous gap where someone should have been. "Where is your mother now?" Thad asked, though something in Wren's expression already told him the answer. "She died last month," Wren replied, her voice small but composed. "Cancer. Before she died, she told me about her sister, my Aunt Caroline, and about you. She said you might not know I existed, but that you were the only family I had left." Thad ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. He had investigators vet every aspect of his family history when he took over the company. How had they missed this? And more importantly, what was he supposed to do with a 10-year-old girl who claimed to be his niece? "Where have you been staying?" he asked, noticing for the first time how worn her shoes looked, how her clothes seemed slightly too small. "Foster care," Wren answered, lifting her chin slightly. "But I ran away. They were going to send me to a group home in Sacramento tomorrow. Mom said family should stick together even when it's hard. Even when they don't want to." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, though she quickly tried to hide it. The rational part of Thad's brain was already listing all the reasons why he needed to call child services immediately. He couldn't possibly take responsibility for a child. He barely had time to take care of himself. His life was built around conference calls and business meetings, not school pickups and bedtime stories. Besides, he had no proof that what she was saying was true. But as the evening fog rolled in from the bay, bringing with it a damp chill, he found himself saying, "Why don't you come inside? We can sort this out where it's warm." Because something in those familiar blue eyes told him she was telling the truth, and because for the first time in 3 years, his massive house didn't feel quite so empty. The interior of Thad's mansion was a study in expensive minimalism. All clean lines, neutral colors, and carefully curated artwork. Wren's footsteps echoed on the marble floors as she followed him into the vast kitchen, her purple backpack clutched tightly to her chest like a shield. The space, with its professional-grade appliances and pristine countertops, looked like it had never been used for an actual meal. "When's the last time you ate?" Thad asked, suddenly aware that he couldn't remember his own last proper meal. The girl's slight frame suggested it might have been a while for her too. "Yesterday morning," Wren admitted, trying to sound casual about it. The foster home had rules about snacking between meals. Thad opened his Sub-Zero refrigerator, revealing nothing but protein shakes, sparkling water, and a few takeout containers. "I don't cook much," he said, feeling strangely embarrassed. "But I know a place that makes great burgers. They deliver." "Mom used to make the best grilled cheese," Wren offered quietly, running her finger along the edge of the kitchen island. "With 3 kinds of cheese and tomato soup from scratch. She said Grandma Caroline taught her before everything went wrong." Thad's hand froze on his phone. His mother had made that exact same meal for him countless times when he was young. It had been their special tradition on rainy days. The memory hit him like a physical force. The smell of melting cheese, his mother's laugh, the warmth of their kitchen on stormy afternoons. He looked at Wren more closely now, seeing hints of his mother's features in her face beneath the birthmark. "What exactly did your mom tell you about what happened?" he asked, pulling up a delivery app while trying to keep his voice neutral. "About why she and my mother, why they didn't stay in touch?" Wren climbed onto one of the high kitchen stools, her feet dangling. "Not much. She just said that great-grandfather Blackwood was really strict about appearances and family reputation. When Mom was 17 she got pregnant with me. She wouldn't tell them who my father was. They gave her a choice, give me up for adoption or leave. So she left." Wren touched her birthmark unconsciously. "She said Aunt Caroline tried to help secretly for a while, sending money and letters, But when she married into the Sterling family, great-grandfather threatened to reveal some big family secret if she didn't cut ties completely. The pieces started falling into place in Thad's mind. He remembered overheating his parents arguing about financial discrepancies in the family accounts when he was young, his mother crying behind locked doors, his father's insistence that they distance themselves from the Blackwood side of the family. He'd been too wrapped up in his own world of prep schools and expectations to question it deeply. "Your mom must have been very brave," Thad said softly, surprising himself with the words. "To choose you over everything else." Wren's chin trembled slightly. "She was. Even when we didn't have much money, even when she got sick, she never regretted it. She said true family is about love, not about what you look like or how much money you have." She gestured to her birthmark. "The kids at school used to tease me about this, call me names. Mom told me it was my special mark, that it meant I was destined for something extraordinary." The food delivery app forgotten, Thad found himself moving around the kitchen island to sit next to Wren. "You know, I have a birthmark too," he said, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a small, irregular patch of darker skin near his elbow. "My father always made me cover it up for photos and public appearances. Said it didn't fit the Sterling image. I used to hate it, but now." He looked at Wren's brave, beautiful face. "Now I think maybe it's a reminder that perfect isn't always better than real." A small smile tugged at the corner of Wren's mouth, the first he'd seen. Mom would have liked that. She always said the Sterlings could use a dose of real. Just then, Thad's phone buzzed with an urgent email from the Tokyo office. His first instinct was to respond immediately, as he always did. But looking at Wren, at the hope and fear warring in her expression, he made a different choice. He turned the phone face down. "How about we make grilled cheese?" he suggested. "I'm sure we can find the ingredients somewhere, and you can teach me your mom's recipe. I'd like to hear more about her if you want to share." The smile that broke across Wren's face was like sunshine after rain, transforming her entire countenance. For the first time, Thad saw past the birthmark completely, seeing only his niece, his family, a chance to break the cycle of secrets and appearances that had torn their family apart. If you're enjoying this video and want more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss out on any of the amazing stories we have coming up. Your support really helps the channel grow and keeps us bringing you more of what you love. Thank you. After 3 grilled cheese attempts and 1 minor smoke alarm incident, Thad and Wren sat at the kitchen island with their slightly imperfect sandwiches. The kitchen, for the first time since Thad had bought the mansion, smelled like a home. Melted cheese, warm bread, and the rich aroma of tomato soup filled the air, along with the lingering scent of their failed first attempt. "Not bad for a CO," Wren said, dunking her sandwich into the soup. A drop of tomato landed on her chin, and she quickly wiped it away with her sleeve. "Mom would say it needs more love though. She always said cooking was 20% ingredients and 80% heart." Thad watched her eat, noticing how she took small, careful bites despite her obvious hunger. It reminded him of charity galas, of his mother teaching him proper etiquette, of appearances always mattering more than comfort. "You don't have to eat slowly here," he said gently. "This isn't the foster home." Wren's shoulders relaxed slightly, and her next bite was bigger, more natural. As she ate, Thad found himself studying her features more intently. There was something about the way she tilted her head when thinking, the slight furrow of her brow when concentrating. It sparked a memory he couldn't quite place. "Tell me more about your mom," he said, breaking his own sandwich into smaller pieces. "What did she do? What made her happy?" "She was an art teacher at the community center in Portland," Wren replied, her eyes brightening. "She taught kids how to paint and draw, especially kids who couldn't afford regular art classes. On weekends we'd go to the park and she'd sketch people walking by. She could capture someone's whole personality in just a few lines." Wren reached into her backpack and pulled out a sketchbook. "She left me this. It's full of her drawings." Thad accepted the worn book carefully, as if handling a precious artifact. As he flipped through the pages, his breath caught. The sketches were beautiful, full of life and movement. There were studies of hands, faces, children playing, and scattered throughout, dozens of drawings of Wren at different ages. In each one, the birthmark was rendered with particular care, made to look almost luminous, like a blessing rather than a mark to hide. But it was a sketch near the back that made his hands shake. A young man, barely more than a boy, sleeping in what looked like a university library. The date in the corner read Stanford University, Spring 2014. The young man was him. "Your mother went to Stanford?" Thad asked, his voice carefully controlled. No, but she used to visit Aunt Caroline there sometimes before everything happened. Mom said those visits were the happiest times of her life. She loved the university library, said it felt like a cathedral of knowledge. Ren leaned over to look at the sketch. Who's that? Mom never told me. Thad closed the book quickly, his mind racing. Spring 2014, he'd been a sophomore, burning himself out trying to maintain perfect grades while running his first startup. He remembered falling asleep in the library countless times that semester, but he had no memory of Cassidy Blackwood. Yet here was proof she'd been there, had seen him, had drawn him with the same care she'd later used to draw her daughter. Just someone your mom observed, I guess, he said, handing the sketchbook back. The timeline was starting to align in his head, pieces falling into place that he wasn't ready to examine too closely. You said she never told you about your father? Ren shook her head, dunking another piece of sandwich in her soup. Just that he was young and brilliant and that he probably never knew about me. She said she didn't want to complicate his life. She looked up at Thad, her blue eyes serious. I used to be angry about that, but Mom said sometimes love means letting people follow their path, even if it leads away from you. Thad stood abruptly, gathering their empty plates. The weight of untold stories and hidden truths pressed against his chest like a physical presence. It's getting late, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. You must be tired. I have a guest room upstairs, several actually. We should get you settled. Are you? Ren hesitated, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. Are you going to call social services? The question hung in the air between them. The responsible thing would be to say yes, to let the proper authorities handle this situation while he hired investigators to uncover the truth. That's what the board would expect. That's what his father would have done. Instead, Thad heard himself say, not tonight. Tonight you're family and you're safe here. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. The smile that lit up Ren's face made her birthmark seem to glow in the warm kitchen light, like a map leading to a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to discover. As he led her upstairs to the guest room, Thad couldn't shake the image of that library sketch, or the growing certainty that Cassidy Blackwood had left him more than just a drawing all those years ago. Later that night, after showing Ren to one of the guest rooms, the one with a bay window overlooking the garden, Thad found himself unable to sleep. He sat in his home office, Cassidy's sketchbook open before him, studying the library drawing under the soft glow of his desk lamp. The young man in the sketch looked so peaceful, unaware that his life was about to change forever in ways he wouldn't discover for a decade. His phone buzzed, Margaret, his assistant. He'd missed 3 important calls and a video conference with investors in Singapore. The thought of business meetings and quarterly reports suddenly seemed trivial compared to the mystery unfolding in his home. He texted back, doing something he'd never done before, personal emergency. Clear my schedule for tomorrow. Standing at his office window, Thad watched the fog roll across the bay, thick and mysterious as the past itself. A soft sound drew his attention. Bare feet on hardwood floors. He turned to find Ren in the doorway, wearing an oversized t-shirt he'd found for her to sleep in, her hair slightly mussed. Couldn't sleep? He asked, recognizing his own restlessness in her stance. The room's too big, she admitted, hugging herself. Mom and I shared a tiny apartment. I could always hear her breathing. She paused, then added quietly, I miss that sound. Without thinking, Thad pulled out his phone and opened a white noise app he sometimes used during long flights. Here, he said, selecting the gentle breathing option. It's not the same, but maybe it'll help. Ren took the phone, a small smile playing at her lips. You have trouble sleeping too? Ever since my parents died, he found himself admitting. The silence gets too loud sometimes. She nodded sagely as if this made perfect sense. Mom said Aunt Caroline was like that. She needed noise to drown out her thoughts. That's why she loved thunderstorms. Ren's fingers traced the edge of his desk, stopping at a framed photo. Is that them? Your parents. Thad picked up the photo, his mother and father at their lake house, laughing as they stood on the dock. Yes. This was taken about a month before the accident. They were heading to a charity event in Lake Tahoe. The roads were icy. He set the photo down, the familiar pain rising in his chest. Mom kept a picture of Aunt Caroline in her jewelry box, Ren said softly. She'd take it out sometimes when she thought I was sleeping. She'd talk to it, tell her sister about her day, about me. She touched her birthmark absently. She said I got my eyes from the Blackwood side, but nobody knows where the birthmark came from. Thad's hand moved unconsciously to his own hidden birthmark. Genetics are strange that way. Sometimes traits skip generations or appear unexpectedly. He thought about his own mother's eyes, so like Ren's, so like his own. The same shape, the same shade of blue, a shade he'd seen in another pair of eyes over a decade ago in a library at Stanford. Mr. Sterling? Ren's voice was hesitant. I found something else in Mom's things. I wasn't sure if I should show you, but... She pulled a folded piece of paper from the pocket of her borrowed shirt. It's a letter she never sent. To you. Thad's heart seemed to stop for a moment. With slightly trembling hands, he accepted the letter. The paper was worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. The date at the top was from 3 months ago. Dear Thaddeus, it began in elegant, artistic handwriting. By the time you read this, if you ever do, I'll be gone. The doctors say I don't have much time left, and there are truths that need to be told. I've watched your success from afar, seen you grow into a man of power and influence. But there's something you don't know, something I should have told you that day in the Stanford library when... A sudden crash of thunder made them both jump. The fog had given way to an unexpected storm, rain now pelting against the windows. Ren instinctively moved closer to Thad, and he found himself putting a protective arm around her shoulders. Maybe we should both try to get some sleep, he said, carefully folding the letter without reading further. Something told him he wasn't ready for its contents yet, that this truth, like the storm outside, needed to arrive in its own time. We can make breakfast in the morning. Do you like pancakes? I've never made them before, Ren said, her earlier anxiety seemingly forgotten in the face of this new prospect. But Mom said Aunt Caroline made heart-shaped ones for special occasions. She did, Thad confirmed, memories flooding back. With chocolate chips and whipped cream. Tell you what, tomorrow morning we'll try to recreate them. Between the two of us, we might figure it out. As he walked Ren back to her room, thunder still rolling outside, Thad felt the letter burning a hole in his pocket. But watching her climb back into bed, seeing her small form almost swallowed by the massive four-poster, he knew that some revelations could wait. For now, she needed security, comfort, and the promise of heart-shaped pancakes in the morning. Good night, Mr. Sterling, she murmured, already half asleep. Good night, Ren, he replied softly. And, you can call me Thad. As he closed her door, leaving it open just a crack, the storm outside seemed to echo the tumult in his heart. Tomorrow he would read the letter. Tomorrow he would face whatever truth Cassidy Blackwood had kept hidden all these years. But tonight, in this moment, he was simply a man providing shelter to a child who needed him. A child whose eyes matched his own in more ways than he was ready to acknowledge. Morning light filtered through the lingering storm clouds as Thad stood in his kitchen, surrounded by the aftermath of their pancake attempt. Flour dusted the countertops, eggshells littered the sink, and the first batch had turned out more abstract expressionist than heart-shaped. But Ren's laughter, bright and uninhibited, made the mess worthwhile. Mom would say we're creating art, she giggled, trying to flip a pancake with the expertise of a cooking show host and nearly sending it to the ceiling. Just, maybe not the kind you hang on walls. Thad caught the wayward pancake with a plate, surprising himself with his reflexes. I'm pretty sure my mother's recipe didn't include pancake acrobatics, he said, unable to keep the smile from his voice. He'd forgotten what morning laughter felt like. The letter from Cassidy lay unopened in his office upstairs. He'd woken before dawn, standing outside its door for nearly an hour, hand on the doorknob, before heading to the kitchen instead. Something about making breakfast with Ren felt more urgent than uncovering painful truths. Your phone keeps buzzing, Ren observed, pointing to where his cell phone vibrated across the counter with incoming messages. Is it important business stuff? Thad glanced at the screen. Dozens of missed calls, emails about urgent decisions needed for a merger, his uncle demanding to know why he'd cleared his schedule. The old Thad would have dropped everything to handle these crises. Instead, he turned the phone face down. Nothing that can't wait, he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Now, let's figure out how to make these actually look like hearts before we run out of batter. Ren's expression turned serious as she studied the cookbook they'd found buried in a kitchen drawer. Mom always said the secret to hearts is in the pour. You make a V, and then fill it in. She demonstrated with the batter, her tongue poking out in concentration. To their mutual amazement, a nearly perfect heart shape formed on the griddle. You're a natural, Thad said, watching her beam with pride. Must run in the family. Speaking of family... Ren's voice grew quieter as she watched the pancake bubble. What are you going to do with me? I mean, I know you can't just keep a kid you found on your doorstep, even if we are related. The question hit Thad like a physical blow. He'd been so caught up in the immediate present that he'd almost forgotten the reality of their situation. Legally, he had no claim to her. The responsible thing would be to contact the authorities, let them verify her identity, go through proper channels. "What do you want?" he asked instead, turning off the burner to give her his full attention. Ren kept her eyes on the pancake, using the spatula to trace its edges. "I want..." Her voice wavered slightly. "I want to stay somewhere where I don't have to hide my birthmark. Where people don't look at me like I'm broken or need to be fixed. Mom never made me feel that way, and neither do you." Thad moved around the island to stand beside her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her birthmark. When she nodded, he gently traced its outline with his finger, just as she'd traced the pancake's edge. "You know what I see when I look at this? I see strength. It takes courage to wear your uniqueness openly in a world that wants everyone to look the same. Like how you hide your birthmark under long sleeves?" she asked innocently, but her eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. Thad rolled up his sleeve, revealing his own marked skin. "Maybe we both have something to learn from each other." Just then his phone buzzed again, this time with a text from his uncle. "Emergency board meeting called for noon. Your absence will be taken as resignation. Don't throw away everything your father built." Looking at Ren, her face dusted with flour and pancake batter, Thad realized he wasn't just looking at his niece. He was looking at a chance to break the cycle of secrets and shame that had haunted both sides of his family. The Sterling Empire, his father's legacy, the expectations of the board. None of it seemed to matter compared to this moment. "How about we make a deal?" he said, picking up a bottle of chocolate syrup. "We'll finish these pancakes and then we'll face whatever comes next together. No more hiding, not my birthmark, not yours, not the truth. Whatever that turns out to be." Ren's smile was brighter than the sun breaking through the storm clouds outside. As they worked together to create a mountain of heart-shaped pancakes, Thad thought about the unopened letter upstairs. Whatever revelations it held could wait a little longer. Right now, in this kitchen full of laughter and imperfect pancakes, he was exactly where he needed to be. If you're enjoying this video and want more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss out on any of the amazing stories we have coming up. Your support really helps the channel grow and keeps us bringing you more of what you love. Thank you. After breakfast, while Ren was upstairs changing into some clean clothes Margaret had quickly delivered from a nearby department store, Thad finally sat down in his office with Cassidy's letter. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the worn paper, the morning light casting long shadows across the elegant handwriting. "Dear Thaddeus," he read again, forcing himself to continue past where he'd stopped the night before. "I've watched your success from afar, seen you grow into a man of power and influence. But there's something you don't know, something I should have told you that day in the Stanford Library when I found you sleeping among your textbooks and entrepreneurship journals. I was visiting Caroline that weekend, trying to gather the courage to tell her I was pregnant. You were so young, so driven, so focused on building your first company. We'd only spoken briefly at a few campus coffee shops, shared a few quiet moments in that library. You probably don't even remember me. Just another art student sketching in corners, too shy to do more than smile when you'd look my way. When I learned I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't tell you. You were barely 20, already on your way to changing the world. My family had already disowned me for refusing to fix the problem, as they put it. I couldn't bear to watch you choose between your dreams and an unexpected responsibility. So I chose for both of us." Thad had to stop reading, his vision blurring. Fragments of memories surfaced, a quiet laugh in the library, gentle conversations over late-night coffee, a sketchbook always in hand. How had he forgotten? The startup had consumed him then, every waking moment devoted to coding and investor pitches. He'd barely slept, barely eaten, barely noticed the changing seasons, let alone. A soft knock at the door made him look up. Ren stood there in new clothes, a simple blue dress that made her eyes even more striking. His eyes. Cassidy's smile. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Come here," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "There's something we need to talk about." He gestured to the chair beside his desk, the same chair where countless business deals had been negotiated. Now it would hold something far more precious. Ren sat down, her feet barely touching the floor. She looked at the letter in his hands, recognition flickering across her face. "You read it?" "Part of it," he admitted. "Ren, when your mother spoke about your father, the young man she met at Stanford, did she ever mention where exactly they used to meet?" "The library," Ren answered immediately. "She said it was her favorite place because it was quiet enough to draw, but not so quiet that you felt alone." She tilted her head, studying his expression. "That's you in her sketch, isn't it?" The sleeping man? Before Thad could respond, his office phone buzzed. Margaret's voice came through the speaker. Mr. Sterling, the board members are gathering. They're demanding your presence in 30 minutes. Mr. Harrison says if you don't show up, they'll vote to remove you as CEO. Should I send the car? Thad looked at Wren, at this child who'd appeared on his doorstep with her mother's smile in his eyes, carrying a truth that would change everything. The empire he'd built, the legacy he'd protected, it all seemed hollow compared to the weight of what he'd unknowingly left behind 11 years ago. Tell them I'll be there, he said finally. But I'm bringing someone with me. He turned to Wren, his heart pounding. Would you like to see where I work? Where your Aunt Caroline used to work. There are some people I think should meet you. Really? Wren's eyes lit up, but then doubt crept in. Won't they stare at my birthmark? Thad stood, rolling up his sleeve to fully display his own birthmark. Let them stare. It's time for both of us to stop hiding who we are. He picked up the letter, sliding it into his jacket pocket. He hadn't finished reading it, but he didn't need to, not yet. The truth was sitting right in front of him, written in every familiar feature of Wren's face. There's more to tell you, he said gently, about your mother, about me, about who you really are to me. But first, I need to make sure you're legally safe, that no one can take you away. Will you trust me a little longer? Wren stood, smoothing her new dress with careful hands. Mom always said trust isn't about being sure of everything. It's about being willing to take the next step together, even when you're scared. Your mother was very wise, Thad said, his voice thick with emotion. He held out his hand. Ready to take that step? As Wren's small hand slipped into his, Thad felt the weight of the letter in his pocket. The full confession of a love story written in library whispers and coffee shop smiles, of choices made and paths diverged, of a father and daughter finding their way back to each other through the winding roads of fate. But those revelations could wait. Right now they had a board meeting to attend, and Thad Sterling, for the first time in his life, was ready to show the world his true face, birthmark, heart, and all. The gleaming tower of Sterling Industries cast its shadow over the San Francisco streets as Thad's Tesla pulled into the private garage. Wren pressed her face against the window, eyes wide at the sight of the building she'd only seen in magazine photos about her uncle. No, her father, though she didn't know that yet. It's like a crystal growing out of the ground, she breathed, fogging up the glass. Did you design it? Your Aunt Caroline did actually, Thad replied, helping her out of the car. She was an architect before she married my father. This was her last project. He smiled at Wren's amazed expression. She would have loved showing you around. As they walked toward the private elevator, Thad noticed security guards exchanging puzzled glances at the sight of their CEO holding hands with a young girl with a prominent birthmark. Let them look, he thought. Everything was about to change anyway. Margaret was waiting at the elevator, her usually unflappable demeanor showing signs of stress. Mr. Sterling, the board is, oh. She stopped short at the sight of Wren, her eyes widening as she took in the girl's familiar features. Margaret had worked for the Sterling family long enough to recognize those eyes, that particular shade of blue. Margaret, this is Wren, Thad said calmly. She'll be joining us for the meeting. Sir, I don't think. Margaret began, but Thad held up his hand. Trust me, Margaret. She needs to be there. He knelt down to Wren's level. Remember what we talked about in the car? No matter what happens in there, what anyone says or does, you just keep your head high. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Wren nodded solemnly, then surprised both adults by reaching up to straighten Thad's tie. Mom always said first impressions matter, even when people are wrong about you. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, but Thad's mind raced. The boardroom would be full of his father's old friends, conservative businessmen who valued image and tradition above all else. The same men who'd pressured his mother to cut ties with her sister, who'd helped maintain the family's pristine facade at the cost of real relationships. As they approached the boardroom, Thad could hear raised voices through the heavy oak doors. His Uncle Harrison's distinctive baritone dominated. He's throwing away everything his father built. Charles would be turning in his grave. Wren's hand tightened in his. Are they angry because of me? No, Thad said firmly. They're angry because they're afraid of change. But sometimes change is exactly what a family needs. He looked down at her, seeing Cassidy's quiet strength in her stance. Ready? She touched her birthmark with her free hand, then dropped it deliberately. Ready. Thad pushed open the doors, and the heated conversation inside died immediately. 12 pairs of eyes turned to stare at them. The young CEO who'd mysteriously abandoned his duties, and the little girl whose very existence challenged everything they thought they knew about the Sterling family. "Gentlemen," Thad said into the silence, his voice steady, "before we discuss the future of Sterling Industries, there's someone you need to meet. Someone who represents both our past and our future." His Uncle Harrison stood up abruptly, his face reddening. "Thaddeus, what is the meaning of this? This is a board meeting, not a daycare center." "This," Thad continued, squeezing Wren's hand gently, "is Wren Blackwood. My niece." The lie felt bitter on his tongue, but he needed to establish the family connection before revealing the full truth. "Daughter of Cassidy Blackwood, my mother's sister. The one this board helped erase from our family history." The color drained from Harrison's face. Other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They all remembered the scandal, the whispered conversations, the documents they'd helped bury. "More importantly," Thad said, his voice growing stronger, "she represents everything this company should stand for but doesn't. Innovation. Authenticity. The courage to be exactly who you are." He rolled up his sleeve, displaying his birthmark proudly. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. And I'm tired of letting fear of imperfection drive our decisions." Wren stood straight beside him, her birthmark catching the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. In that moment she looked so much like her mother, like the young woman who'd had the courage to choose love over appearance, truth over convenience, that Thad's heart ached. Harrison Sterling slammed his hand on the polished mahogany table, making several board members jump. "This is preposterous. The Blackwood girl made her choice years ago. She chose to disgrace her family, to have a child out of wedlock, to what?" Thad's voice cut through the air like steel. "To prioritize love over appearances? To choose her child over your precious reputation?" He guided Wren to an empty chair, positioning himself protectively beside her. "Tell me, Uncle Harrison, how much did it cost to keep Cassidy's story out of the papers? How much did you pay to make my mother's sister disappear?" An elderly board member, Mr. Chen, cleared his throat. "Thaddeus, you don't understand. Your father worked tirelessly to build Sterling Industries' reputation. The scandal would have..." "Would have what?" Thad interrupted, pulling out his phone. With a few taps, the wall screen behind him lit up with headlines about Sterling Industries' latest technological innovations, their charitable initiatives, their market dominance. Would have overshadowed this? Our actual achievements? Or would it have simply shown that the Sterlings are human, that we have stories and struggles just like everyone else? Wren watched the exchange with quiet intensity, her eyes moving from face to face. When she spoke, her clear voice carried across the room. "My mom never wanted to hurt anyone. She just wanted to be herself, to keep me, to make art that showed people's true beauty." She touched her birthmark unconsciously. "She always said the real scandal isn't being different, it's pretending to be something you're not." Several board members shifted uncomfortably, struck by the wisdom in her words. Margaret, standing by the door, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Harrison wasn't finished. "This is emotional manipulation. You bring this child here with her condition, expecting us to..." "Her condition?" Thad's voice was dangerous now. He rolled up his sleeve further, displaying his own birthmark. "You mean like this? The mark I've hidden my entire life because of people like you? Because it didn't fit the Sterling image?" A murmur ran through the room. Most of the board members had never seen Thad's birthmark, had no idea it existed. He'd worn long sleeves to every meeting, every photo shoot, every public appearance since childhood. "The world is changing," Thad continued, his voice softening. "People don't trust perfect corporate facades anymore. They want authenticity, humanity, real stories." He pulled Cassidy's letter from his pocket. "And I have a story to tell you, one that will change everything about this company's future." "You wouldn't dare," Harrison growled. "Think about your father's legacy." "I am thinking about legacy," Thad replied. "But not just the legacy of profit margins and stock prices. I'm thinking about the legacy of courage I see in this little girl. The legacy of love her mother chose. The legacy of truth that my mother tried to protect before you and my father forced her to choose between her sister and her marriage." Wren reached up and took Thad's hand, sensing his emotion. The gesture wasn't lost on the board members. The natural affinity between them, the unmistakable similarities that went beyond their shared birthmarks. Mr. Chin leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps it's time for Sterling Industries to lead in a different way. To show that success and authenticity aren't mutually exclusive. "This isn't just about corporate image," Thad said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is about family. About choosing what kind of people we want to be. He looked down at Ren, seeing in her face everything he'd been too busy, too blind, too afraid to see before. And I choose to be the kind of person who stands up for what's right, who embraces truth over convenience, who puts family first, all family, not just the parts that look good in annual reports. The room fell silent, the weight of decades of secrets and appearances pressing down on them all. Through the windows, the San Francisco sun broke through the morning fog, casting long shadows across the boardroom table. Shadows that looked remarkably like barriers breaking down. If you're enjoying this video and want more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss out on any of the amazing stories we have coming up. Your support really helps the channel grow and keeps us bringing you more of what you love. Thank you. Harrison pushed back his chair, standing to his full height. If you insist on pursuing this foolishness, at least spare us the theatrics. What's in that letter that you think gives you the right to upend everything we've built? Thad looked at Ren, seeing questions in her eyes. She was smart. She had to sense that something bigger was coming, that the letter in his hand held more than just family history. He took a deep breath, knowing that once he started reading, there would be no going back. The truth, he said simply, unfolding the worn paper. About choices made 11 years ago, about sacrifices and secrets, about... He swallowed hard. About who Ren really is. Mom never showed me that letter, Ren said quietly. She just said it was important, that I should give it to you if I ever found you. Thad began to read aloud, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The hardest part wasn't keeping the secret. It was watching from afar as you built your empire, knowing that our daughter would inherit your determination, your intelligence, your birthmark. Yes, Thaddeus. Ren is your daughter. The boardroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Ren's eyes widened, her hand unconsciously moving to touch her birthmark, the mark she shared with the man she thought was her uncle. Harrison sank back into his chair, the color draining from his face. Thad continued reading, his voice growing stronger. I didn't keep her from you out of spite or shame. I kept her from you because I saw the fire in your eyes when you talked about changing the world, about building something lasting. You were meant for great things and I couldn't bear to be the one who held you back. But Ren deserved to know her father and you deserved to know your daughter. I just couldn't find the courage until it was too late. Margaret was openly crying now, and even some of the board members were dabbing at their eyes. Mr. Chin reached out and squeezed Harrison's shoulder, as if steadying his old friend. The time we spent together in that library, Thad read on, his voice thick with emotion, those quiet conversations about art and dreams and changing the world, they gave me the greatest gift I could have asked for. A daughter who has your spirit, your eyes, and yes, your birthmark. The mark that the Sterlings tried so hard to hide became our family's signature, proof of a love story written in genetics and chance. Ren stood up slowly, her small frame trembling. You're my father? Really? Thad knelt before her, the letter still in his hand. I am. I didn't know until now, but looking at you, your eyes, your birthmark, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. I should have known the moment I saw you on my doorstep. But why didn't Mom tell you? Why didn't she? Ren's voice cracked. Because she loved us both enough to let us find our own way back to each other, Thad said softly. She knew that timing matters, that some truths need time to grow. And now? He glanced around the boardroom at the faces of men who'd spent decades hiding truths and protecting images. Now it's time for all of us to stop hiding. Harrison cleared his throat, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. The press will have a field day with this. Sterling CO discovers secret daughter, it'll be everywhere. Good, Thad said firmly, standing with Ren's hand in his. Let them talk. Let them see that Sterling Industries is more than profit margins and perfect facades. Let them see that we're human, that we have stories, that we believe in second chances and found family and the courage to embrace truth, no matter how complicated. Mr. Chin leaned forward, his wise eyes twinkling. Every great company has an origin story. Perhaps it's time for Sterling Industries to have a new one, not just about business success, but about human connection, about a father and daughter finding each other, about the strength it takes to choose authenticity over appearance. Ren squeezed Thad's hand, looking up at him with eyes that mirrored his own. Does this mean, can I stay with you? For real? The question hung in the air, carrying the weight of 11 years of separation, of choices made and paths not taken, of a love story that began in a university library and continued through a child who carried the best of both her parents. Yes, Thad said firmly, answering Ren's question about staying. Yes, you can stay. I've already missed 11 years, I'm not missing another moment. He turned to face the board, his stance protective yet resolute. And if any of you have a problem with that, I'll step down as CEO right now. Some things matter more than business. To everyone's surprise, it was Harrison who spoke first, his voice heavy with unexpected emotion. Your mother, Caroline, she knew about Cassidy's daughter, didn't she? That's why she kept sending money, why she fought so hard to maintain contact until. He trailed off, decades of rigid corporate authority seeming to crumble from his shoulders. Until you and my father forced her to choose, Thad finished, but without anger now. Yes. She knew she had a niece, a granddaughter, out there somewhere. She tried to protect both Cassidy and Ren, just like she tried to protect me by hiding my birthmark. But protection through denial isn't really protection at all. Margaret stepped forward, holding her tablet. Sir, social media is already buzzing. Someone in the building must have seen you arrive with Ren. There's speculation, photos? Then let's control the narrative, Mr. Chin suggested, his business instincts kicking in. Not hide it but shape it. A story of family reconciliation, of corporate responsibility extending to personal accountability. It could redefine Sterling Industries for a new generation. Ren, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. Mom's art gallery, the one she ran at the community center. It's going to close now that she's gone. All those kids who got free art lessons who learned to see beauty in different things. She looked up at Thad. Could we help them? A smile spread across Thad's face as an idea formed. Not just help them, we could expand it. The Cassidy Blackwood Foundation for Arts and Innovation. A nationwide program teaching kids to embrace their unique perspectives, to see beauty in difference, to transform their challenges into creativity. Using Sterling Industries resources to nurture the next generation of innovators and artists, Mr. Chin nodded approvingly. Bridging the gap between technology and creativity, just like your mother tried to do with this building's design. Harrison stood again, but this time his posture was different. Less confrontational, more contemplative. Charles, your father, he was wrong about many things. I was wrong. We thought image was everything, that success meant fitting a certain mold. But looking at you too. He gestured to Thad and Ren, to their matching birthmarks and determined expressions. Perhaps it's time for Sterling Industries to embrace a new definition of perfection. Thad felt Ren's small hand slip into his again, and in that moment he saw their future unfolding, weekend art classes in the community center that would bear her mother's name, bedtime stories in the mansion that would finally feel like a home, board meetings where real family values would shape corporate decisions. I have one condition, he announced to the board. From now on, every major company decision needs to pass what I'm calling the Ren test. Does it make the world better for the next generation? Does it encourage authenticity over appearance? Does it honor both innovation and humanity? Margaret was already typing furiously on her tablet, her professional composure restored despite her tear-streaked cheeks. I'll draft a press release about the company's new direction and the foundation. And sir, she smiled at Ren, I'll need to clear your schedule for the next few weeks. It seems you have some catching up to do with your daughter. The word, daughter, rang through the room like a bell of truth, clearing away decades of corporate pretense. Ren beamed, her birthmark catching the sunlight streaming through the windows, transforming what had once been seen as a flaw into a badge of authenticity, a mark of destiny that had led her home. As the board meeting concluded, Thad and Ren stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the fog lift completely from the San Francisco Bay. The morning's events felt simultaneously like a lifetime and a heartbeat. Behind them, board members were already on their phones, coordinating with PR teams and legal departments to handle the announcement of Sterling Industries' newest, and most important, family member. There's something else in Mom's letter, isn't there? Ren asked, her reflection overlapping with Thad's in the glass. You didn't read all of it. Thad pulled out the letter again, turning to the final paragraphs. Your mother wrote about you, about how proud she was of your strength, your creativity, your ability to see beauty where others saw flaws. His voice softened. Would you like to hear it? Ren nodded, leaning against him as he read, Our daughter has your determination, Thaddeus, but she has my heart. She looks at the world like a canvas waiting to be painted with kindness. When other children teased her about her birthmark, she drew portraits of them that showed their own hidden beauty. When her art teacher said landscapes should be perfect, she painted storms and called them nature's masterpieces. She makes me believe in magic, in second chances, in the power of being exactly who you are. Tears slipped down Ren's cheeks, but she was smiling. I remember when I painted those storms. Mom hung them in her gallery and called them perfect imperfections. Harrison approached them cautiously, holding a framed photo Thad recognized from his father's old office. "I found this in storage last year," he said, handing it to Ren. "It's your grandmother Caroline at your age. She had a birthmark too here along her collarbone. Your grandfather made her cover it in every other photo, but in this one was just for family." Ren traced the image with gentle fingers. "We're all connected," she said softly. "Through art and birthmarks and secrets turned into stories." Margaret knocked gently on the door frame. "The legal team is here with temporary guardianship papers," she announced. "And the contractors are ready to begin renovations on the east wing whenever you're ready to discuss Ren's room design." "My room?" Ren's eyes widened. "I can decorate it however I want?" "Within reason," Thad laughed, already imagining what an artist's daughter might do with a blank canvas of a bedroom. "Though something tells me your taste is better than mine. That minimalist design phase I went through." He shuddered dramatically, making Ren giggle. Mr. Chin, who had lingered behind to make some calls, joined them by the windows. "The community center in Portland, the one where Cassidy taught, they're willing to partner with the foundation. They want to make it the pilot program for what they're calling the Sterling Blackwood Initiative for Creative Innovation." "Mom would have loved that," Ren said. "Especially the part about combining art and innovation. She always said technology needs heart to be truly revolutionary." Thad looked at his daughter, his brilliant, brave, beautiful daughter, and saw the future of Sterling Industries more clearly than ever. Not just in profit margins and market shares, but in art classes for underprivileged kids, in technology programs that celebrated different perspectives, in a corporate culture that valued authenticity over appearance. "Speaking of innovation," he said, "an idea forming, how would you feel about helping me with something? The children's hospital we support has a rather sterile art collection. I think it's time for some perfect imperfections of our own." Ren's face lit up with the same expression Thad had seen in the mirror countless times when a new idea struck. The perfect blend of inspiration and determination. "Can we start with storms? Beautiful, messy, powerful storms that show kids it's okay not to be perfect." "We can start with whatever you want," Thad replied, meaning so much more than just the art project. "We have all the time in the world to create something beautiful together." 1 month later, Thad stood in the newly opened Cassidy Blackwood Art Gallery at the Portland Community Center, his daughter's hand in his. The walls were filled with artwork from local children, each piece celebrating what made them unique. At the center of it all hung Ren's latest painting, a stunning portrait of her mother, the brushstrokes capturing Cassidy's gentle smile and artistic spirit. "Mom would have loved this," Ren said, looking around at the children sketching at the new art tables, their faces lit with creativity and joy. "She always said that art rooms should sound like laughter." The space buzzed with energy as kids from all backgrounds explored their creativity together. Some wore hearing aids, others had visible differences like Ren's birthmark, and still others bore invisible challenges. But here, in this safe space of creativity and acceptance, those differences weren't barriers, they were inspirations. Harrison approached them, looking more relaxed than Thad had ever seen him in his casual sweater instead of his usual suit. "The board just approved the expansion. By next year we'll have centers like this in 20 cities. He smiled at Ren. "Your Ren test is changing how we do everything. The new tech accessibility program for differently abled kids starts next month." "And the stock price?" Thad asked, almost as an afterthought. "Up 30% since the announcement. Turns out authenticity is good for business." Harrison knelt down to Ren's level. "Your grandmother Caroline would be so proud of what you've helped create here." A young girl with a prosthetic arm approached Ren, holding up a colorful drawing. "I made this for you," she said shyly. "It's a storm like the ones you paint, because you showed me that different can be beautiful." Thad watched as his daughter hugged the girl, their differences forgotten in the pure connection of the moment. He thought about the path that had led them here, from a lonely mansion and a foster home to this place of belonging and purpose. Looking around the gallery, he saw the legacy of 3 generations of strong women: Caroline, who had tried to protect her sister's secret; Cassidy, who had chosen love over acceptance and art over appearances; and Ren, who was teaching the world that our supposed flaws could become our greatest gifts. The final piece of Cassidy's letter had said it best. "Remember, my darling daughter, that life's most beautiful masterpieces aren't perfect, they're authentic. And you, with your father's determination and your mother's heart, are my perfect masterpiece." As evening fell, casting long shadows through the gallery windows, Thad gathered everyone's attention. Standing beside his daughter, their matching birthmarks proudly visible, he delivered the message that would become the foundation's motto. True beauty isn't found in perfection, but in the courage to be authentically ourselves. Every mark on our skin, every difference we carry, every challenge we face, these aren't flaws to be hidden, but stories to be shared. Because in sharing our truth we give others permission to share theirs. And in those shared stories, we find our real strength, our real family, and our real purpose. Ren looked up at her father, adding her own wisdom, and sometimes the longest journeys lead us right where we were meant to be, home. As they walked out of the gallery that evening, a father and daughter united by love, fate, and matching birthmarks, they left behind a new kind of legacy. Not one built on perfect appearances and hidden truths, but one founded on authenticity, acceptance, and the transformative power of embracing who you really are. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories are written not in spite of our differences, but because of them. And sometimes, the greatest gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages, like a little girl with a birthmark, showing up on a CEO's doorstep to teach him that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to live authentically and love unconditionally. If you enjoyed this incredible journey of discovery and transformation, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to life. You can also support us through Super Thanks if you'd like to contribute directly to the creation of future content. Leave a comment below telling us what this story meant to you. We read every single one. Until next time, remember, your differences are your superpowers, and your truth is your greatest strength.